Hi, guys. Welcome to this episode of the Trainer Feed. We're your host. I'm Angel Sanchez. We have Jacques Delagere,
How's it going, everybody?
and David Bravo is out for today.
He is about to be on relax mode, right? On chill.
I
Good
think
for
so.
him. He works
Yeah.
hard. It's good.
Yeah, you need a little break. Everybody needs a little break. I think that's important. Maybe we could start off with talking about breaks.
Yeah, you have any scheduled breaks from here in the future?
I haven't scheduled anything, but I like to dive a little bit deeper into having my weekends off. I know that a couple of clients of mine are going away for the weekend, or not going away for the weekend, but for a couple of weeks, doing some taking advantage of working from home and just traveling. And it's going to help me out because I'll be able to just have my weekends back. So I've been working 6 days a week, which is fine. People work more, so it's nothing crazy. But I just like to be able to turn off everything and just not have to worry like Friday night that I got to get up and meet somebody, or like get up and do something. In fact, like I really feel like for me personally, I don't know if it's personal training or if it's like the style of work where you have these appointments. When I don't have appointments, I feel more relaxed. When I do have appointments, I'm always thinking about I got to do this, to do this, to do this, to do this, because I know it's a domino effect. It's not just like one event. It's like you have to do things before that in order to get stuff done. So
Time
when
is
I
money as
chill,
well.
yeah, when I chill, I'm just like phone could go over here. I don't care. I'm just out and about. My wallet can go over here. Wallet stays in California. I stay over here. It's a little inside joke. What
Yeah.
about you? Do you have any scheduled breaks coming up?
So we've actually booked Puerto Rico for my birthday. I'm turning 30 in August, and we wanted to go to California, but we thought we'd be better off going off later in the summer. It turns out they re-established the mask mandate in California, or at least in Los Angeles. So now we were planning on going at the end of September, and now I don't know how that's going to look. I also have a friend's wedding scheduled for the end of September, but I don't know. I this is just nature of things, but like I have to I'm having issues with my both my British and American passport. So that's the one thing in its entirety. But then I don't know if I go to Europe and there's got to be a 6 day quarantine, which because I had a client who went over and that's what it was. It kind of seems a little silly to go over for 6 days. I don't want to sound insensitive, but that's something that's kind of like we're gonna wait and see how it goes. But I'm looking forward to Puerto Rico. Haven't been there ever. I think we're going to San Juan, and there's something I'm really excited to do. Is at night kayak ride, I guess you would call it, and where the water's all lit, so you can see everything in the water. I think maybe I'm making that up, but it's a kayaking at night, and it looks really cool. So I'm excited for that. But
Yeah,
picking
it's
back
the
up what you're saying about,
bioluminescent water.
is that what
But
it
that's,
is?
yeah, but you have to, it's not in San Juan though. So it's kind of like on the opposite side
Outside.
of the island. So if you're going to
Gotcha.
go there, you just have to have like
A car.
3 to 4 hours to travel
Oh.
there and then travel back.
Oh, it's like an
Just in,
out there and out back kind of thing.
yeah, like you just want to
Good
be
to know.
mindful of the timing because then they also have like select boats that go. So if you are going
Mm,
to do that, you got to book that ahead of time. And then also just make sure you have that driving to and from, because that is
yeah.
that's a tricky drive because not all the lights after the hurricane, not all the lights in the streets are actually working. They have like those military
Oh.
like red lights, those little
Yeah.
red like lights to light up the street to make sure people don't crash into buildings or whatever, but it's not actual street lights. So I would
Gotcha.
suggest
Just do the
booking,
research on,
yeah,
yeah.
doing the research is booking the thing, trying to see how far it is to and from where you're staying at, and then also just making sure that I wouldn't want to drive there, so I would suggest like getting a driver.
If we don't drive it, yeah.
Yeah, because it's just
Good
a
to
little
know.
bit,
That's,
it's not well lit, and you have to do it at night because you want to see the bioluminescent.
yeah. I didn't think about how far it could be. That's
Yeah,
good to know. So maybe we won't do that. But just looking forward to, actually funny because the client, I told him that we're going to be out there and he's like, why do you want to be out there in August? It's going to be so hot. And for the listeners in the UK that could probably testify to this, that having grown up in the UK for your childhood, where the weather's so mild, when you can get very warm weather or very tropical, I think it's a little bit different as well. When you mentioned going to clients or when something's possibly going to have a domino effect on the rest of your day. It's all different if you're on vacation in a warm climate, I think, right? Compared to I have to go from A to B to C to E to D. D. But the point being, if you have to go from one client to another and you're going all over the city or Upper West Side, whatever it is, and it's not going to be a deal breaker if you come up to the session sweating. They know that you're a hard worker and you're coming to be smart. But that's something that kind of, I wouldn't say stresses me out, but I'd rather do without turning up like sweating. And that's why, if possible, when it's an indoor facility, I like to be able to get there 5-10 minutes before, just to be able to acclimatize my body temperature to the room. And then as soon as you leave that facility, you're like, at least in New York City, the past couple of days has been a little hot, but I can't complain. It's this is, again, I've never really had this as a kid, so
yeah, it's hot over there, but it's different heat, so you should be fine. Like, it's not going to be like the same sort of heat, especially because it's such a small island and it's surrounded by water. Like, it'll be
breeze.
Fine. Yeah, you'll be chilling. It'll be good, but it does get hot. So I don't know if Alex is sensitive to the heat, but probably not. She'll be fine. She'll be fine. Alfie's going with you?
No, Alfie's going to stay with her mom, and it's funny because her Frenchie and our Frenchie were together last weekend, and those two were just at it for like 3-4 hours, just playing, but like nonstop. And it's actually like made me think of having kids, about how exhausting it would be if they're just constantly like fighting or at each other. And I'm like, oh my god, it's gonna be even harder with kids. But just a little foresight into the future, like what I start thinking. But so Alfie will not be coming with us, but even right now, for example, when you walk him, it's like you get to the end of the block, you don't do any further, because it's just anyone who has a dog as well that's walking their dog in the heat. Something that's good to remember is to test the heat, how hot the pavement is, or whatever the material of the concrete is. Putting the back of your palm on the ground. Now, if it's too hot for you to put your hand on the ground, it's too hot for their paw. It's like a general rule of thumb. Sometimes I see people walking the dogs for a long, I'm like, yeah, they're panting, but like just be mindful, if anyone listening out there and they're walking the dog. But
does their paw like have like special like calluses to like displace heat or something like that? Like, I know it's callus to like prevent like materials from going in or breaking through.
Like, it's definitely harder than our skin, right? Like, if you like with glass, I always get a bit cautious of glass around there if you walk some glass. But the likelihood I'm gonna try this, but like if we put glass underneath our hand, it would piece the skin with them is a little thicker. But
because I know their bodies are different. Like, they don't sweat, so they can't.
Yeah.
But I wonder about their paws. Like, if there's a material. I mean, there has to be something built in, because it's it's nature. They've been walking around on their paws for centuries.
Well, I know it's not, and this is a little jumping ahead of the topic, but I was listening to a podcast when they talk about when we're sleeping, how we typically release the majority of the heat through our palms, our feet, and the top of our forehead, like our forehead. So I imagine that's similar for dogs, and that's why I don't know, any vet's probably gonna shred me for it, but I think there's possibly something to do with that as well.
It's possible. I thought we also displace heat through our ears too. Like, I don't know about when we sleep, but I know like when we're outside walking around, like the heat,
possibly
covering the ears is a big deal. Anybody who's been in like cold weather knows like you need something around your ears. If not, you're done.
Actually, my brother,
ears, so I gotta look out for
that. My brother always told me, this is really interesting. Whenever you were hot and say you want to wash your face with water, cold water, right? I never followed this, but I did this and I felt it was effective. He always said running your wrists under the cold water helped with lowering the body temperature pretty fast, just because of, I guess, the veins right there. But I never did the research. For anyone who's happy to call me out, shout me out. I'm happy to discuss that further. But
yeah, I don't know about that. I'm not co-signing it just because I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna say everybody just dip your wrist in some water, because we all know you just want to take that water and just throw it over your head, like
yeah.
But anyway, let's talk about podcasts, because you were speaking about podcasts. So what podcast were you listening to that they told you this thing about sleep?
So it was Dr. Andrew Huberman is on the Joe Rogan podcast, And when we had Chloe Lavray a few weeks ago, she spoke about listening to his podcast, and I started listening to it a little bit. The only thing about his podcast, and this is not even a criticism, this is more just my poor attention to detail, is if you don't pay full attention for a second, you miss a huge part of an explanation. So he talks a lot about, I don't know, like with Joe Rogan, for example, in this episode, he talks a lot about how, I'm going to butcher this too, but he was pretty much, one of the things he's discussed was how melatonin works, right? Or how it's regulated, and how in a bottle of melatonin capsules, say that each capsule is a serving of, I don't know, 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams. He said actually each one is not 5 or 10 milligrams. Let's say it's 10 milligrams, I can see. It could be anywhere between 5 and 85% of that, 15 and 85% of that. So it's no wonder that if you take a melatonin capsule one night, sleep very good, and the next night you don't sleep well at all. It could be there's different servings of melatonin in that capsule. But he just spoke about that as an example. That's the kind of stuff he was talking about. Again, I can't really do it justice by going into any more detail, but he's very fascinating. He's a professor at Stanford, I want to say. But I just find Joe Rogan, even though it's not everyone's cup of tea, very fascinating to listen to. And he had that one of Quentin Tarantino on a few weeks ago, which was a very good listen as well for anyone who's interested. And then I typically have my hockey podcast right now, even though the season's over, stuff's going on in the off season, so listening to that. And then there was another one I listened to. There's like 3 hockey podcasts I listen on a frequent basis. And the other one was Impact Theory with Tom. I'm gonna butcher his name, Tom Bilyeu. So he's a lot about motivational speaking or just general positive thinking. And he discusses a lot of really interesting ones. And one of his interesting episodes where his wife and him do a joint one. She has her one, right? And it's very funny because they discuss how they're complete polar opposites. And for so long, not so long, but for, I think they've been together like 15 years, something like that. But in the beginning, they thought that they would just never, it was very, very unlikely they would work out. But they break down, if you are with someone who's polar opposite to you, to your partner at least, like things that can make it work, or just conversations that need to be had. Finances, and that's something they discuss, is that he was very bad about, he had debt or something where she was very well off, or whatever it is. But so those are the ones I've been listening to, and those are worth interesting. But what about yourself, Angel?
Damn, so he was getting with her for the credit.
So maybe he in his defense, he said, "Oh well, school's a lot more expensive in the U.S. He's American, she's British, and in the UK, when I was at school, I mean, the most out of pocket you would pay if you're including tuition and accommodation is for those two alone. Then you have other fees along the way, but pretty much £6,000, which equates to more to like between $8,000 and $10,000 a year. But so if you're saying for a 4-year degree, it was like $40,000. I mean, that's really not that bad. So that's what he was saying. Like, well, some schools here in the States, if it's that much a year versus how much you do for a 3 or 4-year degree, then that's the comparison. So that was his defense, that he'd spent so much money on being at school. So
that's crazy, man.
Yeah,
that's why you gotta go CUNY. I don't know why more people just didn't
go
CUNY. I know a lot of friends who are they're gonna be paying off their student loans for the next probably like 20 years. If this episode on YouTube is still floating around in 20 years, they'll probably be like, I almost did it. Just like croak.
20 years later. And going out of state costs a lot more as well, right?
Yeah. So they're like very
crazy.
I mean, it's easy to rack up like at least 6 figures, in 2 years.
And no guarantee either. That's the other thing. Yeah. When you come out of school, there's no guarantee. And that's a challenge. That's scary.
But I was fortunate. I went to CUNY, did that thing.
And Lehman, right? Lehman College?
Yeah. And I worked as I was in school, so it helped me just pay it off really quickly.
What was your part-time job, actually? I don't know if you ever told me. Oh, maybe I do know, but let's tell it for our listeners.
Oh, man. I worked at a warehouse. So long story short, I just worked at a warehouse. I was a forklift driver, among other things. And, I was very fortunate in the sense that I was able to do overtime, do like weekends, have the summers there, and have like a more flexible schedule. Obviously, a couple of things helped, just helped me have that position. So it was really good. And yeah, I did that through college. And then like 2 years, I think it was like a year after I graduated is when I finished off paying off my student loans. It wasn't
Oh,
that much. I was just
that's so
trying to figure it
good.
out. And then I
A year
landed a
after.
PT job, and then I started working at Equinox. So then I was doing 2 jobs there. And then that helped just like put the nail in the coffin. But that was good. And then just started saving from there. But
Savings a big, yeah. Savings a big thing. But
you got
I
with
remember
her
you
for the credit.
putting full. I remember I discovered you were forklifting. I was like, what, Angel? Really?
Yeah, man, forklift driver. It was a crazy time. Now I look back at it, like some of the things were just like, wow. Like some things were great, some things were just like I wonder
Also great.
how more people yeah, also great. I'll just put it like that. Also great. But it was cool. It was a very cool time. Good time. And I got a lot of experience, so much experience with like working with people and all that. Obviously, any job that anybody does, you'll take something from it. But really learn work ethic, having to be up at like 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning just to go to work. Like that stuff is
It's
not,
tough.
and especially at an early age. Started in high
to do that.
school, did it through college. But anyway, podcasts that I'm listening to, I'm not really listening to that many. If I'm be honest, I did check out the Huberman Lab after Chloe spoke about it, and I kind of met the same point that you were talking about, where it's dense and he'll go into detail, and if you're not prepared with like either just like focused on listening to it or like pen and paper, it becomes very difficult for me to be able to walk away with it with some sort of, I don't know, with like anything, right? So I'm trying my best. I know I was watching some or listening to one of his episodes about eyesight and focus, or perception and visual prowess, something like that. So it's like you do something with your hands at the peripheries and you slowly start to have them come forward. And then once you observe both fingers from the side, then it'll help you with either focusing on a given task or help you widen your widen your peripheral vision. That will help enhance visual, et cetera, for athletic performance or for focus on some other stuff. I think he made mention to Z Health. I think Z Health works with that, if I'm not mistaken. But again, I was doing dishes, walking around.
You lose a
It's
second
Harlem,
and
you
it's
gotta stay focused.
Yeah,
You can't be
yeah.
like trying to take show notes while you're walking the streets of Harlem.
It's dense, so I agree. Because some of the other ones I listen to, that it might be just the fact that the topics are just so simple and it is sport. But the other ones, when they talk about a player or they talk about a contract, whatever it is, it's so easy to do something and hear simple information like that. But as soon as when he was talking about eyesight, and another one I listened to, he was pretty much saying that if you, oh man, I can't. But he was pretty much saying that if you do something on a daily basis that walks your eyes a certain way, I think it was he said that people, oh man, I don't remember what it was, but something along the lines of people that were out in nature more as opposed to living in a city had better eyes, had better short sight or long sight because they were used to seeing more scenery or just things in general further away. So it's almost as if they train their eye to be better adapted to deal with seeing objects from further away. He talks, that's not the specific of what he said, but it was along those lines.
Yeah.
And he goes into detail about, because this and because that, and it makes sense. And some of the signs, it makes sense. But I'm to the point where I'll hear it, I listen, I understand it. But if you ask me to explain it, I don't.
Yeah.
I can, like the melatonin. I
That's
got it, and he's, and he.
No, I was just gonna say, like, that's how I feel. Like, part of the podcast is breaking it down to the point where your listeners can understand. But if only your listeners are going to understand on a, like a professorial level, or somebody who is, a doctor will understand it. It's kind of like you're just speaking to a small group, which is fine. But you know, and sometimes you just gain stuff from being in rooms around people, right? Like being around
Absolutely.
researchers, you start to think like a researcher, you start to learn a little bit about stuff. But sometimes it's just like, shit, I know I'm in the wrong room, so let me just get
Well,
out of it. So
but
I listen
there's
to
go on. I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt. Go on.
no, I was just gonna say I listened to a couple of his episodes, but you know, that's nothing crazy. And I stopped listening to Joe Rogan as much.
Mm.
There were a couple of things where I was just like, damn it, man, like he's just butchering some exercise science, you know, just like saying some nonsense about like
The,
how kettlebells will do this, that, and the third. And I'm just like, no, man, that's
you
not how
like,
it works.
yeah.
And then but he's telling people, and then people believe it. And I'm just like,
And he's got
the
a big
base that you
following.
have,
Yeah,
you know, and they're just
that's
learning.
dangerous.
They're saying that, and they're just like learning it. And they're just like, oh yeah, that's what it has to be. It's like, no, it's not what it is. But
There's a really so one of the podcasts I listen to, they have a page just dedicated for memes,
yeah,
and if they do some really good ones. Anyway, they took a clip from Joe Rogan's, and it wasn't him, but it was his guest. It says, "Do you know there are this many thousands of kids that get adopted every year?" He's like, really? He said, how'd you know that? He's like, I don't know. Where'd you see this? I don't know. Go on the
yeah,
internet.
yeah,
So he like breaks.
yeah.
Did you see that? He
No, I
like
didn't.
breaks.
But
He. I'll send it to the team. Maybe we'll share it on our page. But like he brings up a fact and then he says, I don't know, I heard it. He's like, where'd you see it? And he's like, I don't know, check, like, Google it. So, like, he breaks up a fact, can't follow through, like, can't back it up. And then he says, I don't know, just Google it. Like, that
yeah,
was the funniest thing. I gotta find which guest that
but
was because they put a
he
face
does.
over him. But
Yeah, that and then I mean, I still love Joe Rogan. Like he's a cool comedian. I'm gonna see him in October in Madison
I
Square
forget
Garden.
he's got, that's the thing,
But
he's done so much, right?
yeah, he's
Like,
very
it's like a jack
accomplished, which
of
is
all trades. Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty impressive. But there was another thing where I was watching one of his clips, and they have it on YouTube, and I read the comment section, and you know, reading the comment section, thank God our comments are just so like either non-existent or there's
You.
just like one person like trying to sell an ad for like some herpes
Yeah,
cream for
it's
whatever
always
reason.
ads. Yeah.
Uh, he said he was talking to a fighter, and the fighter, you know, was talking about how he had a very hard upbringing. He was working in like these mines, and that helped him like move and, you know, do stuff, and he was trying to feed his family, and it was hard for him to get an education, but then he went out there and did what he had to do. And then Joe Rogan kind of like extracted what he said is like, so working in the mines, you must have gotten really strong to do these leg kicks, right? Like he tried to like tie in like the physical effort that that child abuse, like working in the mine would
So
build
bad.
like your endurance and your grit, which sure, maybe it will, but
Yeah, I mean, to
you know,
some
my
extent, it
man's just
probably
trying to
did.
tell his story from his
Hey,
perspective, like in his country. It's just, I don't know, being
oh
pimped out
my
by these
God.
coal mining and diamond mining and all that other stuff. I forget what it was
He
exactly, but
he has, yeah, I
it
forget
was
he's a
just
jack of
crazy.
all trades. But the one with Dave Chappelle was pretty funny, right? And they
Yeah,
made the
Dave Chappelle was
reference
really
to
good.
Albert Einstein. He's like, can you imagine Einstein when he must be like the most popular guy for women. Like,
Oh my
they were
goodness.
just like, you can't, because when you talk about Einstein, you just think of the accomplishments. You think about how smart he was, how I think he had a learning disability, right? And they themed him not academic or not smart, and then he wanted to do all the good stuff, but you don't think of anything else but that
Yeah.
usually. So there's a funny comment that, but yeah, I think podcasts as well. The other thing, touching on it, you mentioned dishes. I like to do them with dishes as well because dishes. I remember Missy mentioned if the dishes are dirty, you're gonna think about them, right? Like they're not done, and once they're done, they're done. And talk about use an analogy for doing notes, and I've done a bit more of that with journaling, right? Just put it on paper and whatever, sleep better, whatever. But when it comes to doing dishes as well, sometimes if you got like a whole day's worth, and whether I've got like Tupperware, it's me and Alex's whatever, and then Alfie's Tupperware, whatever. But putting a podcast and I'm just, I can be there 20 minutes, chill as a bean, like listen to the podcast, listen to whatever. And then I like the fact that I can just put my headphones in while she's watching something and just not even worry about, like, oh, just watch your thing, do your thing. And what I'm getting as well is with screen time,
Yeah.
because screen time is something we spoke about had increased obviously since the pandemic and like doing Zoom calls, whatever. But if you're able to take away your screen time, yes, you can argue that it's phone time still, unless you do it from your iPad, computer, whatever. But to be able to listen to something and take your eyes away from the screen, I think are huge. But when people ask me about, or when people tell me, I'm just not into podcasting. I think it's like anything. You just have to find the one that you want to listen to. I
Yeah.
never did listen to podcasts until probably the winter of 2019. Like I
Yeah.
started to get into one of them, and I was like, oh, it's 2.5 hours long, like one episode. I was like,
Yeah,
sheesh.
you just break that up
You gotta
because
break it up exactly.
it's fine, because at the end of the day, you don't have to like listen to it all throughout. You just break it up and just like have small bites. And it
Yeah.
helped me at least, because bouncing back and forth between training sessions, it just helped me feel like I was still in a room with people just talking and chilling.
Mm,
Another podcast that I listen to is Joey Diaz has a podcast. I just forgot what it actually was called, but I like that one also because it's very dirty. So if anybody who's going to check that out, like, just know that.
be one.
So be warned, it's dirty. You think dirty is this, is even worse. But he's a comedian, and I saw him live, and he's a really good comedian. Made me laugh, dying a couple of jokes that he had.
Really.
He reminds me of some of my childhood friends and some of
Uh-huh.
their parents. So it's kind of funny to hear the things that he says, because it just reminds me of that. And that's
Okay.
one of the reasons, not because I'm like getting anything from like the guests that they have on or anything. It's just like I like to feel like I'm in a room, especially now I'm doing some more virtuals. I'm just in a room with people, just hearing that, I just feel more cool, calm, collected. And then I'm able to do all these other tasks and, get a laugh while I'm doing that too.
And going back to feeling a room of people, I'll admit that the early stages of the pandemic, which were yes more than a year ago, having some form of routine based element prior to COVID, whether it was working out, whether it was commuting, whatever. I had that one podcast that I listened to every week, and yes, it was about sports. So they struggled to find stuff to talk about at one point because there was no sport for 3-4 months. But they during the whole pandemic period, they would talk about other stuff like Tiger King, right? So they just like cracked me up and whatever. So having that really helped me mentally, like just see it through and similar to what you were talking about, having other people in the room, hearing that they're also complaining about that they're not happy, that they're kind of tired of it, like it mentally can be reassuring for that aspect that you're not the only one going through this, or you're not the only one thinking this way, and you're like, it's okay to get a little pissed or a little bit annoyed about the situation, and you're going to the same through, but you make light of it, right? Like at the same time, you have I think when I listened to some of the other podcasts and some of their other guests said, yeah, I mean, before I would have to have traveled to do an interview. Now I just jump on my laptop from my home and I can see my kids or whoever it is, right? And that wins for everyone. And I know in one of the previous episodes we spoke about us as trainers, where our clients aren't in town, but we still can stay busy. I love that. Yesterday was one of the first days in a while where I didn't have a single virtual thing. Everything was in person, but that's very rare right now.
Yeah.
But it's usually a bit above every day. But
Yeah, I hear you. And I love the virtuals as well. I'm happy that I've been able to adapt, very fortunate to be able to adapt. And then if I had a stumbling block, I was able to overcome it. I was talking to a client the other day about it because he's doing work from home. And he was telling me, like, I asked him, did you get a new chair? Because I was looking into like chairs and shit. I was just like, I need to up my game. And I have upped my game. I got a monitor now, I got the laptop stand. But this chair is whack. This chair is like at least 20 years old. Um, yeah, at least 20 years old. It doesn't move. I mean, it moves, like the wheels turn, but like it doesn't move up, down, forward, back. Like it's just,
right,
it is what it is. But anyway, I asked him and he was telling me, oh yeah, I got a new chair, I got this. And I said, did you get that as a product of working from home or did you have that before? He was like, oh no, I bought everything. I bought everything because my home was not made for that. I was just doing everything in the office. And I started thinking about the stuff that I had to get as well. And those stumbling blocks, like you meet them and some people just work with it and that's fine. But at the same time, I found myself like my neck was hurting, my back was hurting, I kept dropping calls. So I had to like figure stuff out in order to make that better. And I know my body is one thing that I just won't compromise with anymore because we're getting older. You're about to turn 30, right? Even though we're still
yeah,
young and we have a lot more life to live, it's going to be a lot. It's not going to be as good as you think it will be unless you listen to your body. right? So
Well,
if your back is aching today, you're not just gonna and then tomorrow and then
it's
the
not
day
going to
after,
disappear.
it's not gonna disappear. But some people just say, you know what, I'm just gonna pack it away. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
let
they
me
just
let
like
me put
don't worry
some
about it.
let me put some, I don't know, some something to relieve the pain, or
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, go on. Or
No,
sleep
then
better.
I see some people, yeah, I see some people, and it's, everybody makes their decisions for whatever reason, right? I just
Yeah,
choose to value when my body speaks to me, and put that first for right now. Obviously, things can change.
but
I
you
don't
make a
have
good.
that many responsibilities, so
But the point of listening to your body, where that's something I've always approached with clients when they have a sensitivity for more than a week. That window, that week window, how's it feel? Same or worse? Gotta see someone about it. Like you
yeah,
gotta see someone. It's not worth,
yeah,
because it's like a lot of things in life. The longer you leave it, I don't know if it's a bad analogy. Like some things in life, the longer you leave it, the worse it gets. Like, and the
yeah.
sooner you can, not necessarily diagnose it, but
It's putting your attention to it.
yeah, and you can.
This everything is attention based,
Mhm.
and that's how people draw value, and that's why everything is so expensive. And like you can make money from anything. It's like they just want your attention, right? And listening to your body, as soon as you put attention to it and you draw attention to it, and then you do whatever you need to do, like you said, either get refer to somebody or have a manual therapist or physical therapist work on you, then it'll start to resolve itself. But until you pay attention to it, nothing's going to happen.
But paying attention to it, and then also, as you said, if something doesn't feel good, just rest it. And I think there can be a fine line between something feeling a little bit achy and something feeling injured, or you being injured. But you're talking about like a specialist, like you said. It's not to take credit away from the healthcare professionals, but if you have an injury that's very minor, that's very manageable in the beginning, you might just go to physical therapy. But if you've left it so long, you might ultimately only have no choice but to have surgery. Now, physical therapy at the time might sound like it's expensive, or it might sound not necessary, right? Assuming you'd gone to get looked at earlier. But then if you only have surgery as your choice, I tell you that's a lot more expensive
Yeah.
than physical therapy. But it's all about the priorities. So, as soon as someone says, "Oh, this feels fine, we can push through it," I'm just like, I always use the example of, you're not competing at the Olympics, you're not getting gold medal, and it's not to say you can't have an infinite. It's not to say you can't have an infinite potential,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not worth you pushing through a pushing pattern if your shoulder doesn't feel good. Let's
Yeah.
wait a week later. I actually have a client right now who has like early onset arthritis in his shoulder. So there's patterns I think that should be okay, and then sometimes they feel good, and one week they don't. And I'm like, all right, like today we were doing a mixed rack row pattern. So you're rowing with the cable and you hold the kettlebell racked in one hand. And I in my head, I think, oh, helps with posture. This should help with shoulder. Today, it just wasn't feeling good. And I just, you acknowledge it. All right, so you changed from the rack to suitcase grip. And that felt a lot better. It's not
Yeah.
a right or wrong. Like 2 weeks ago, it felt fine.
Yeah.
So I guess going back to what we're saying, just like make the adjustments and communicate that to our clients that, hey, no biggie. I'm still going to work your core. I'm still going to test your central nervous system to work effectively with low stress being placed on the body in different ways. Just let's talk through it. There's no, we talk about no one blueprint being for everyone. Um, Again, I just think you listen to your body, it just really goes a long way in so many different realms.
Yeah. I heard, I've done that before, and recently I just did that with another client of mine, and it is important to just address that, because I made the same point that if we were going to compete in something, then that's a different conversation. But if you're not going to compete and the competition is just it's a finite period of time, right? So people are saying, oh, why competition? It's like, well, you have a goal and it's only for this set period of time. And then you have to address, or the athlete has to address what they want to give for the sake of, winning. But for everybody else, it's like if you're not competing at that level for a short period of time for that goal, for whatever purpose that you feel you need to do, because people sacrifice a lot for these medals and stuff like that. They'll sacrifice family time, they'll sacrifice friends, they'll sacrifice birthdays, holidays,
Everything, yeah.
right? And at the end of the day, if they're willing to sacrifice and push through an injury, just for the sake of winning, then that's on them. But
Mm.
you got to be able to let them know. But
There's
I'm not.
consequences of that, right? There's
There's
outcomes.
always, yeah, there's always, and probabilities, right? There's a
Mm.
probability that this might happen versus a probability that it won't, depending on like the sport or whatever you're doing, and then that always changes.
I want to jump in on that real quick. I know people listening think I probably have every opportunity of linking hockey to this podcast when it's not a hockey podcast. But when they wrapped up the final game last week, whatever, the team that won, they listed their injuries, right? But these are guys who are injured that either missed part of a game but never missed a game. They well, some of them missed the games, but anyway, all but one of them didn't miss a game, right? And one guy had fractured ribs, one guy had a torn ACL, two guys had broken hands, one guy had a fractured fibula, got a metal plate put in to be able to play like a week later. Like I'm not saying these are good examples, but what I'm saying is, going back to what you just said, they have these guys. They only have a finite number of years to really make their money.
mm-hmm.
What's the difference of them waiting another week before surgery? Where, excuse me, if they wait 2 more weeks for the surgery, right? I mean, they have to recover. It's going to take them 4 months to recover. What's the difference between doing it tomorrow and doing it 2 weeks time where they can still play 2 or 3 more games? I mean, it's already broken.
Versus,
I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah.
versus a client
Those,
that has a wrist ache and they want to do like their push-ups are part of the plan or renegade rows, and they're saying, no, I can push through it, but my wrist, I'm just telling you, my wrist kind of hurt, they're feeling off. It's like, I'm not gonna risk that.
no
There's
one thinks
what's
any differently of you. Yeah.
Yeah, right. What are you trying? It's like, no, I gotta push through. I gotta. It's like, for what?
You just
For
gotta,
what?
yeah. A funny other thing as well is I've had this where someone sends me, "Oh, I want to try this," and it's a pattern where they can't. There's a pattern they can't do, or pattern that doesn't feel good for their body as a baseline to the movement, and they say, "Oh, let's do this. Can we try this?" And I'm for it, but we've spoken about how that baseline pattern, it doesn't feel good. So we're not gonna take that pattern that doesn't feel good for us, layer it with more complex elements to it, and then try that. It just I've had those scenarios too, and there, and any trainer listen to this, if you do find yourself in that instance, what I would do is work with a client. You can work with a client. I'm not saying do this every time, but some clients, if someone is going to push for doing something, be open, be transparent with them. Like, okay, if you want to work towards that, let's revisit that baseline pattern. So what I'm talking about, let's say if you're doing a very difficult kind of push-up, whether it's on a Swiss ball, whether your feet on a Swiss ball, whether your feet are on a band, whatever it is. But if the push-up itself is painful, we're not going to layer an unstable point of contact for your feet or for your hands because the push-up alone itself is too much. So sometimes I'll revisit that with clients. Again, anyone listening to who does have the scenarios, walk with the client. Okay, you want to try this? And as soon as the client may realize, oh, this is too painful, they'll just not accept that they can't do the movement, but realize that we can still find another way of doing something similar. But that specific look of the movement, at least for this time being, just isn't the smartest option. It's just not right now until you need to heal or whatever it is you've had done or injury wise.
Yeah, I hear you.
Uh,
I'm with it too.
but yeah.
I wanted to touch on one last thing before we kind of like wrap up. We're trying to keep this episode a little bit short. I wanted to touch on running because it has some application here. A lot of people are going out there trying to run and getting or feeling the ramifications of trying to run having either no foundation or not done it in a long time. One of the things that I've started to do is I started to take these walks in order to help build that foundation. Whenever it's like you're going from the winter time into the summertime, I try to like walk a little bit more, especially if I haven't been running as much. I hate running in the cold. So it's just uncomfortable, and it helps me to just layer that foundation of just getting in those walks to build that aerobic foundation, but then also to let my body understand that this is something that we're going to have to start figuring out. So a lot of people just go from not doing anything, being a couch potato, to just like sprinting. Like, oh yeah, I used to do this in college. I'll just go and do my sprints. It's like
5 years ago, 10 years ago, I can go do it again right now. Yeah.
yeah, right? And unfortunately, the body doesn't respond well to that. It responds well to progression over time, but not just like shooting for the gold every time. So started doing that, started doing more walking, trying to get building that aerobic foundation, and even the muscles start to respond well to that too. So doing that helps. And then also just starting to work in some inclines that has helped me in the past too. So when I go for like my walks or my runs, I'm trying to diversify it. At first I start in a straight path. So I'm more on Riverside because that's pretty flat. And then I do some hill runs either in Central Park, or I start doing some stairs or something with elevation. Morningside has like some really good stairs for that. Like 1,000 stairs actually. But
Exactly.
that's no.
Oh.
Maybe I should say it, and then it'll be on the podcast and be like, "What? Really? You know, Morningside Park has." I heard on this podcast, Morningside Park has 1,000 stuff. It was built centuries ago. No, let me stop. So yeah, so doing some hills, doing some incline work, that helps, and then also just remembering to recover, because one of the things that, and then obviously, 6-year training program, but recovery is a huge part of it too. I think that sometimes people get a little bit ambitious. These are just like rookie mistakes, just either going into it and just like trying to go, as hard as you can for as long as you can. Or B, you find people who are just like, I'm just going to hit up that frequency, like just go from nothing to just like 7 days a week, and not allowing their body time to recover and trying to make up for lost time. I think psychologically is where people come from with that. But understanding that frequency is something that you need to work into as well, right? You can't overshoot intensity. You can't overshoot frequency. Those two variables you have to implement, and you have to respect them, because if not, the body will give out. So it kind of speaks to the other point that we spoke about listening to your body, but also just in running, because I've seen a lot of runners, a lot of my clients are starting to run again, and they've been having some difficulty getting back into it. So respect the intensity, respect the frequency, start with something flat first, incorporate hills or incorporate some sort of elevation, and then stick with your program. It should be good to go.
I agree with all the above. It makes me think of something that Craig Tveit, I want to say, spoke to me about when he completed his marathon. And this going with you're saying about just, smart, progressively increasing the difficulties or variables and like length of time running, all that sort of stuff. But Craig spoke about strength training, especially lower body, but just strength training in general helped him recover. He said that his recovery day before he was strength training, when he did long runs, would take obviously at least 1 day, but sometimes 2, maybe 3 days, right? Just based on the conversation we had. But when he did the marathon, he said he was sore for the first day, and that was it. He felt the strength training helped him have a stronger recovery. So for those that say they only want to do one or the other, the proof is in the pudding that you're going to do better by complementing each one of them with each other. So that was just something I also always think of when you speak about running, that it's worth doing both of them.
It's surprising though, because I mean, from my perspective, I like resistance training as my baby. Like that's what I first was introduced to, like calisthenics, and then, just body weight training, then resistance training, then cardio through running. So I kind of favor that, but it's interesting to learn how many people overlook that. Even triathletes overlook resistance training. And part of it stems from the fact that when you're training for these long endurance sports, there's so much time that you have to dedicate just strictly to that task. So running, you kind of just don't want to do the other stuff because it's going to take more time, and then it's going to take more energy, but it's so worth doing, because it just, not only with recovery, to Craig's point, I think that Craig is correct. It will help with recovery, but then just prevention of injuries as well.
During
just
the cause of it. Yeah.
Tendons, ligaments, those things will respond well to resistance training, and you just have to give it time.
Agree. No, completely agree.
All right, so we'll wrap it up here. We'll call it here.
Sounds good.
And then we'll catch you guys in the next one. And David will be joining us for the next one.
All three of us for the first time in like a month, I think. Wow, that's something. Yeah.
No, it'll be good.
Band back together.
Later,
All right,
guys.
guys, take it easy.